Hi guys, it's Mark Zickery, Mr. Sci-Fi, and just a little check-in. We'll be talking about some interesting things, but there's a lot coming down the pike. If you haven't checked out the spacesuit contest where people get to make spacesuits and win great prizes, check out the video on Mr. Sci-Fi. It's a really cool contest, and also we're going to be ramping up for crowdfunding campaigns. We're going to be printing more of the Space Command comic book and making the issues available to our fans, and also we're going to be shooting more Space Command and recording the audio play. Lots is coming over the next few weeks and months, and we're waiting to hear from Netflix and meeting with a bunch of other networks in the next few weeks. Tons of stuff to talk about. But, and definitely, check out my Patreon page, and you can buy shares in Space Command, and you can subscribe to Mr. Sci-Fi, and all this stuff we talk about often. But today, one of our fans, one of our Mr. Sci-Fi viewers, asked me what I watch and read that's not science fiction. I thought that was a very interesting question. And so I thought I would talk about that and the way it dovetails to science fiction and dovetails into the things I come up with and things I'm writing and so forth. So basically, here's some of the gist. I'm ongoingly always reading several books at a time, watching a number of TV shows and movies, doing a lot of cross-referencing one way or another. And so among the things I'm doing right now, we just watched the third season of True Detective, which we liked a lot. It starred Mahershala Ali, whatever his name is, and it was really, really, really good, and a return to form for that show. And then often when I'm enjoying a performance by an actor, I'll look at other things he's done or watch other TV shows and movies he's been in. So as I mentioned earlier on a previous podcast, Mr. Sci-Fi video, I just saw him again in Alita and also watched Green Book. He's a very, very, very good actor, and I look forward to what he's going to be doing next. Though in Alita, I felt he was kind of just doing what Wesley Snipes used to do when they cast Wesley Snipes in these kind of roles. So that was the least interesting of the things he's done recently, although I liked the movie very much. And I'm also reading up on Alita. I bought the Cinefx issue about the VFX. I've bought other articles, in various magazines I read, such as Empire and Total Film, about Alita, and I'm going to be buying the book on the making of Alita because I'm very interested in production design and VFX and all of that. Because the more I educate myself, the more I can utilize those tricks on Space Command. So at the same time, I've sort of been on a World War II kick lately. Watched Man in the High Castle, which is based on a book I very much admire and like. And so that led me then to Connie Willis wrote two novels that were nominated, well, they won the Hugo. One is called Blackout, and the other is called All Clear. And basically it's one long book split down the middle, and it's about these time travelers who go back to the Blitz and the V1 and V2 rocket attacks on London and also Dunkirk. And she's very interested in exploring how the civilian population of England was so instrumental in winning the war. And it's a really wonderful piece of work. I very much enjoyed it. Great characters, really, really terrific. It would make a great TV series at some point. But additionally, on the non-science fiction side, at the same time, I'm reading a book. I think it's called Hunting Hitler, and it's about whether or not Hitler faked the suicide and actually escaped to Argentina, because a number of Nazis did, including Mengele and a variety of others. And they were conveyed there via submarine. It was all planned before the war ended. And they revealed recently that the remains that the Russians said were Hitler, that they took back after the war, there was DNA testing on those remains, and not only are they not Hitler, but they're not even a man. And the head of Nazi intelligence, when they exhumed his grave, it turned out that it was 3 individuals, but none of them were him, bits and pieces of 3 individuals. So it's just fascinating to speculate and think about that. And at the same time, I've read a book on Albert Speer, who was Hitler's architect. I have a book on called, I'm going to be reading shortly, on Wernher von Braun, the rocket scientist who was instrumental in the V1 and V2 rockets, and then instrumental in the moon campaign and the campaign to send men to Mars, which never happened. And a very interesting man. And so I'm reading all of that, but at the same time, I've been watching a documentary on Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young because I'm very big fans of their music. I listened to their music when I was a teenager, so I'm watching that and getting all this fun information about them. And again, you never know where something will lead. If I end up writing about World War II, if I end up writing about the rock and roll scene in the 60s and after. And, beyond that, I regularly listen to podcasts, so I'm listening to a number of them regularly, including the Archaeologica podcast, where each week they talk about four recent discoveries in archaeology, because I'm fascinated by archaeology. So they might be talking about the Roman Empire, or new finds of the Maya or the Aztec, etc. And so that's always fun to listen to. And so basically, I just kind of happen upon things and check them out and try and expand my knowledge of the world and of history. I'm fascinated by history, fascinated by archaeology and paleontology. So the more, the better. And I try not lose myself in empty, pursuits, like endlessly watching cat videos or something. Not to be down on cat videos; they're very cute animals, I'm told, but I just try and kind of extend my knowledge of things, and then meantime I'll be reading a number of science fiction novels. I'm reading a book by John Wyndham that was never published until after his death, that he wrote at the same time as Day of the Triffids. Very interesting. It's very similar to The Boys from Brazil. It deals with a cloning campaign done by the Nazis secretly after the war. It was written before Boys in Brazil, and again it never sold, but it's very interesting to read. And I'll also be reading a number of science magazines, Discovery, New Scientist. And sometimes people say, well, how do you have the time for all this? Well, the way I do it is, I go to the gym 3 times a week, run for 35 minutes, walk for 15. So during the 15 minutes I'm walking, I'm reading, because I can read while I walk, though not while I run. I'm watching the Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young documentary while I run, because I can watch that on my phone while I run. And then I'll listen to audiobooks in the car, because LA is a car town. You're in the car a lot, so I'll listen to audiobooks then, or, and so forth. So I basically use my time, when I'm not writing, when I'm not doing my directing and producing stuff on Space Command and all the other projects. I'm trying to use my time well. And then I also, of course, have the round table and socialize with people, and, have a social life, and of course have a marriage with Elaine that we also, take time with. So, today we're taking the day off and going and having fun, going for a walk, seeing what we find along the way. It's just, cool stuff. But I often find that science fiction, if it's good, is grounded in reality, is grounded in real science and real history and real discoveries. And again, as we discover more, we find the parallels. It's funny, because when I was a kid, a lot of science fiction novels were dealing with future history, where there would be huge corporations that ran everything and basically had control. And I think there's, in our world, in the real world, there's sort of like the quote-unquote official narrative, and then you have to sort of read between the lines to see what's really happening. Now, that can be bad in the way that it sparks conspiracy theories. They're nonsense, like, the whole pedophile thing with Hillary Clinton and all that. But it can also allow you to say, well, wait a minute, let's not be distracted by the news of the headlines, which are often designed, there's a lot of noise of like, oh, this and that and this and that of the moment, which is trivial. And I think it's very important to recognize the difference between triviality and what's actually important. Because for me, I think when we look back in future centuries, we'll see that right now, the last few decades, it's been basically the oil wars, where America is interested in and overthrowing governments of oil countries where we want their oil. Additionally, it's the last dying gasp of the petrochemical industry, and so they're shifting over to other things and basically trying to keep a hammerlock on things by having disinformation about global warming, by backing politicians that allow them to continue polluting. And again, this is just my view. This is, again, if you disagree with me, that's 100% fine, because again, I don't mind disagreement. I can, in my work and in my art and in my life, I can basically just try and make the world a better place. And the way I do that is by being kind, and by allowing other people the opportunity to be kind. And so there's a consistency in what I do, hopefully. So, but I think, if, for myself, just from my own vantage point, I think that this really is the world corporations wanting to continue polluting because it's profitable, and wanting to stop people from stopping them. And ultimately, it's going to be untenable. It's totally untenable, because global warming is real and is ramping up. And the only solution, other than extinction, I think, is switching over to electrical and wind and solar and all of these things. And that will happen, because the economics of it will turn. And just as, there was a time when almost everyone smoked, and now they don't, and things change, and part of it, I think, also, by the way, is that people die. And as much as I personally would like immortality, the fact that people die means that no matter how entrenched a power system is, and power structure, no matter how entrenched evil people are, or let's say self-interested people. I just found out, by the way, that 85 families, according to Oxfam, 85 families control, I think, half the wealth in the world, or it's crazy, crazy, crazy. So, and three people control half the wealth in America. So that's interesting statistics. But my point being that no matter how entrenched someone like, Henry Ford. I'm not that he was a villain, but I'm just mentioning someone. Henry Ford would have his agendas and his plans, but then he's gone, and so it's other people running things, and they grew up under different circumstances with different values, perhaps, or at least different expectations of the world they live in. Things change. So that's an interesting mechanism at work in our world and in our lives. And again, something interesting to write about in science fiction, because you start to think about that and speculate about that. So, and again, I'm a child of the books I read, whether fiction or nonfiction, but certainly the science fiction was, the corporations run everything and we have to be individuals and we have to stand against that. Well, I'm a child of the 50s and 60s, particularly the 60s, or let's say the 60s and 70s, because that's really when I was growing up. And so I'm going to reflect that. But anyway, so that's about it for now. And, we'll be posting many things soon. I'm going to be posting about The Expanse and Doctor Who and other TV shows and movies and Space Command. And again, if you want to buy a share in Space Command, contact me, markzickery@gmail.com, 323-363-1259, and also there's Patreon, all those things we talked about, and subscribe to Mr. Sci-Fi, because we're posting a lot, and there's going to be a lot more to come, and I'm going to be at various events in the near future, the Nebula Banquet and panels and all that. Much to talk about, but thanks a lot for everything. I'm here at the dog park, so if you hear growling, it's my two puppies playing around, and that's it for now, and we'll talk again real soon. Bye, guys.